Hey, good morning. You gotta excuse my voice. I just kind of woke up. It's not a problem at all. Usually have some coffee in the morning. It takes me forever to wake up. Okay. Okay, so Baka and Buffout. Okay, so back in the days of Skyrim 32-bit, they had Bethesda created when they well, let's see, when they developed their engine, they kind of hard coded in the engine itself allocators for what they call the heap. And I guess they call it a heap because it's just one big giant block of memory. But everything you do in a computer, like, it has to be moved in and out of memory. Like if I'm going to, for example, like let's say I'm down here programming and I need to walk over to the coffee maker or walk over to the couch and sit down and just kind of rest for a couple minutes. If I was a program, I would have to say, okay, I need to remember, quote quote, where, what I was doing before I got up to go sit down. So I would need to store what I was doing on what they call a stack or put it in a heap. So when I'm done, like sitting on the couch drinking coffee, when I get up to come back over here, it's like, okay, I need to pick up where I left off. You go back to that heap and you get the data off the stack, and that says kind of what you were doing and different things that were going on. So I got the washing machine going back here, so this thing's gonna make all kinds of racket. I'll have to get up here and shut the door here in a second. Okay, so that's kind of like what the heap is. And back in the days of Skyrim, there was a bug in heap allocation. So if you had a lot of mods, and the mods, you gotta excuse my stomach too. I haven't had breakfast, but it's okay. Don't even worry about anything like that. I can get all that stuff later. I don't normally eat like when I first get up. I used to have some coffee or something, and then I'll go get a quick bite. I'll fix me some eggs or something. It won't take long. But okay, so back on Skyrim. So with Skyrim, there was a problem with the heap allocators. So after, if you have a lot of mods, these mods are going to be doing a lot of calls, so it's going to need a lot of store a lot of information on the stack or in the heap so it can go back and retrieve it and pick up where it left off, especially if one function calls another function and calls another function. Then it needs to know what the previous function, the state of the previous function, or it needs to bring data back to that previous function. So it needs to at least record memory addresses on where to jump back to and all of that. If it filled up, it would literally allocate another one. But there was a problem in the allocators. So when it went to allocate another one, it would crash. And I think Shason come up with something. I remember looking at that years ago, and I'd seen where I thought that's weird. And then we were thinking I had to do something with memory allocators. And Shason kind of did a little more. I think he's the one that did a little more research into it and came up with a fix, and that fixed the problem. And that's inherent to the game engine, which carries over because Bethesda doesn't really do a ground up rewrite. I can tell by looking at their code, even though they say they replaced, like, if you have like Gamebryo had certain things that it did, I think it was like fast tree, it would render trees, and you had LOD, like you'd have objects that are rendered in front of the player and then back to the distance, and then it would slowly get less and less details, so it's the textures are not quite as big. Because the objects are not quite as big, so and that would provide a little bit of performance boost FPS wise, because you don't really need to render 4K textures a mile out because you can't really see that detail anyways. Uh, not I mean not not even with your your eyes you couldn't even see that. Um, I mean, you could see like trees, but not like the details, like little things on the leaves and stuff. So that was their way of doing like a performance boost. The Gamebryo engine had that. So Bethesda replaced, they went in and kind of just replaced it, the way that I see it, inside the code, those little sections with their own code. Because they bought the rights to Gamebryo and they changed it. So each iteration of their engine was them building on the Gamebryo. And that's why it has the Gamebryo style all the way back. I like the fact that you can, you can do like, you can change, you can add ESP and ESM files. You can change records in the game. I love that idea. I love that. But they didn't really go back and do a ground up rewrite. Now, Fallout 76 might have done that, but only due to the fact that they popped the game out and it was bizarre. It is a mess. But that's to be expected because a brand new studio, and Bethesda's really known for that. I love their art department, but I don't really like their financial department. They're they're really strange on when it comes to money and stuff. That to me they it's hard to explain, and I don't want to be negative or anything. Like I would not do that to somebody, but um, they're just not my Bethesda's not my favorite company when it comes to taking pride in what they do and making sure that it's 100%. Because they don't really do a lot of fixes after the fact like most other game companies. But other than that, so in Fallout 4, it kind of had the same inherent thing. They fixed it a little bit. They upped some values like Bethesda usually does, but they didn't rewrite it from the ground up. At least I don't think it was that big of a rewrite. So, um, Baka and Buffout 4, I don't know who does that one, XYYZZ maybe or something like that. Um, they went into the code. F4SE hooks the game engine. It actually hooks the programming code and allows them to dynamically change the code while it's running. So they can change an address in there, a function call. They can insert assembly code. They can do things directly into the running code. It doesn't affect the file on disk. It only affects it when it's run. It can plug in a little address, intercept a call, and then do what it wants to do. And one of the things I believe they do is they use system. They use Windows. If you're using Microsoft Windows, they'll use what I call system memory allocators. So it doesn't use the native one that's built into the game engine. They use system allocators, and there's not really a limit to that because it's 64 bits, so you can have up into the terabytes of data allocated by a program. That includes your program, your DLLs, and everything that's loaded. In mods, yes, you can say mods too. But I was talking more like the executable programs before you get to the mods. It includes all that data. Mods, the data the mods create, the program, a whole bunch of stuff. Um, okay, so let's look at the two different ones. We have Baka, and I've already kind of skimmed over this, and I've got Baka disabled, so I know what you're talking about. Where do you set it in Baka? And I apologize because now that I look at this, I realized that I did have a memory allocator, but it was in the Baka scrap heap, not the Baka framework, which is what we're going to look at next. Okay, so I have Baka here. Here, let me turn that. I got Baka here, and I have Buffout here. So these are the two. Now Baka framework is required for some mods. I believe Lighthouse Papyrus Extender requires it. Uh, uh, and like, sorry, my throat's dry. I think Baka Wait Anywhere, like anything Baka does, probably requires his DLO. Um, Buffout is something a little bit different. Like things don't necessarily require Buffout, but Buffout is usually designed to do like engine fixes. I think Baka has some engine fixes in there. Don't quote me on that one, but I'm pretty sure Buffout does because you can enable them. But let me go ahead and I'm gonna pull this up and take a look at the Baka file, and I don't see anything in here to allocate memory allocators. See, because there's enable logging. So yeah, there's nothing here. Um, okay, but I did change. Whoop, this is the wrong one. My apologies. Let me go up here. I'm gonna grab this one first. Yeah. I was looking at that. I was like, wait a minute. That can't have script size in it. That was something totally different. Okay. So enable logging. Comment file name. Not really sure what that is, unless that's the. I'm assuming that if it logs it to beta comment test or some kind of comment thing. Not really sure. Unless he's actually trying to capture comments, that would be a possibility. And you got the patches. So there's nothing in here that actually does. I wonder if I should turn this on. But anyways, there's nothing in here that does memory management. And then if you look at Buffout, let's go into Buffout here and grab this. You can see where Buffout actually has memory management. Let's look this puppy up. Where are you at? Here. Oh, here. See where it says Memory Manager True. I don't have debugging on, but I do have memory management. So Buffout 4 should be handling the memory management. And all that does is when it needs to allocate data, instead of using the native allocator that's coded or shipped with Fallout 4, it actually uses a system allocator. So let me move this real quick over here. And what I was looking for was the scrappy, but I have it disabled, so I'm not going to be able to pop the config up right off the bat. So let me go into the location, and I will grab Baka scrap heap toml or toml or something like that. I think it's like toml. Okay, so here is where it says, and it says where it's got scrap heap. Okay, where it says scrap heap multiplier. I thought for sure, if I remember right, because it's been a while, because I know Baka has changed his code and changed some of his configs over time. And I thought there was something where I could disable it here, but it might have been disabling in Buffout. But here's where you make the scrap heap 4 times the size. And I do believe it uses system allocators for that. So there's a default size that Bethesda uses. Like, let's say it's like 256 megabytes. So if you have 4 times, that's going to be like a gig that it's going to allocate. It's 64-bit application. Fallout 4 is a 64-bit application, so it can be up in the terabytes, and a terabyte is like 1,000 gigabytes. So yeah, there's plenty. There's plenty of space. So what I did is because I believe if I'm not mistaken when I read this, Baka Scrap Heap and Buffout 4 allocators do the same thing. Now, if I wanted to use this, which is which is Baka's Scrap Heap, where it increases it 4 times the normal size, or 3 or 2. I think 2 is the default. I think I made it 4. Because I think he said it may cause a crash. It wasn't fully tested. But what I did is I used, if I was going to use this, then this would be enabled over here. I would have this enabled right here, because when the game loads, it looks for DLL files that end in .dll like this, .dll, and then it loads that when the application runs. So, let me rephrase that. Fallout Script Extender loads those DLLs from a particular folder when the application runs. The application Fallout 4 Script Extender starts the application, patches what it needs as it's loading, and then it injects itself and then loads all the DLLs, and then they all kind of start doing their thing. So I'd have to enable this, at which time this would matter. So I didn't have to rename this because the DLL is not being loaded, because in effect I changed the name. Let me bring this back up so I can do it like this. In effect, I changed the name. So if I wanted to use Baka, I would enable this. But on your end, if you're using Scrap Heap, you would just set it to whatever you want, and then over here in the memory manager for Buffout 4, type false. You want to type this because you don't want to use the memory manager. And I'm assuming I would set the debugging to false too. I don't know what his code, how he coded it. I wouldn't think that would cause a problem. But I also notice up here there's a memory manager for a Havoc system. See, with system allocators. See where it says system allocators right here. So I'm guessing you would set both of these to false. But I would he changes a lot to memory allocators. It's quite a bit. So I'm assuming I would change these to false, and then use the scrap heap, and then go back in and try setting something other than. I'm assuming if you turn memory manager to false, then all the other memory manager ones where it says scale form memory to system allocator probably won't work. So that's just a guess. because it may be something as simple as, if memory manager is false, then don't even attempt to look at the other things. Or each particular section, if it's patched, might call to see if the memory manager is active. If it's enabled, then yes, grab an allocator. Otherwise, just leave it alone. So for Baka, there's really no way to set this. I had to disable it in that way. I think I disabled it over here. I disabled it here, and that way it automatically wouldn't even be used, because I didn't really see a disable option. So yeah, I apologize. I think when I told you that, I was thinking it had been a while, and I was thinking, okay, I had to disable one or the other, because they do want. I've had them both on, and I didn't notice any like increase in crashes or any weird crashes that had to do with memory. One sec, let me grab a drink. Hang a sip of coffee. I don't remember whether there were crashes, but I did have cases where there were recursive calls in scripts, or somehow the engine got recursive, and it overloaded the stack or the heap, and then when it overloaded the stack, it kicked out with a 409. All right, so let's see. Okay, so that's how you would kind of do that. Let me see. There's a couple. I was want to show you something else real quick. Oh, and while we have this, I've got the let's see, this Max Papyrus thing. I went ahead and put this in here. And I've got it set to be 500, which is 5 times. I think the default is like 100. Unless that's default 500. Oh, vanilla. See, oh, yeah, it's default. See, because default value is 500, vanilla is 100. I didn't notice a major difference. Of course, now I'm not running SS2 right now, but I do have a ton of scripts in here. Like, I've got, oh my God, oh man, let's see, I've got 425 plugins. Some are not active, so those wouldn't necessarily count. I think I'm counting active, though. I believe I'm only counting active. And then my mods, as far as installed mods, they are about, 692, so I'm approaching the 700. Some are textures, things like that. But I do have some script-heavy things in there. I put in, SKK has some mods, and that lets me do latency. They're right. It's like right here. Like it's script latency, and it's basically a ring. I've got it down here. I've got it here, and I've got it here. The counter basically gives you draw calls. I think it'll show you how many draw calls are in an area, or no, not draw calls, but I think it shows you how many NPCs, how many objects are in an area. So you can see if you have a lot of heavy laden, like there's like literally billion, like you had tons of NPCs around, persistent, if you have persistent references, because the engine trying to do real-time calculations on all kinds of NPCs. Like there's a fight going on in Sanctuary, but you're not in Sanctuary, so it has to keep rolling the dice as to who gets hit, who doesn't. So that all adds up to that all adds a load onto a CPU or CPU core or a thread, and that can cause scripting to kind of lag out. But you put a ring on, and what it does, it'll show you what your script latency is. And if you don't see a message, there's no script latency. It'll occasionally tell you it's running, but there's no. And I use that, and I noticed that moving into a new area like a settlement, I will have latency, but it'll eventually kind of settle itself out where everything's like flushing in. That might be something interesting to try with SS2 to actually see. And it's not a perfect calculation. I know how he does it. Well, I have a general idea how he does it. Oh man, God forbid that. Yeah, he actually heard me say that. He would be like, no, he doesn't know anything. But anyways, all that fun stuff aside, I kind of have a general idea how he's calculating it, and sometimes because he has to have a starting number and an ending number to get the difference or the delta, and then he can use that to calculate like whether it is actually latency or not. because basically there's so many ticks that happen a second, and all scripts should have a piece of themselves executed every tick. If it does not, then you count how many times a function is executed, and then you compare that against the ticks, and that tells you if you are 60, the function was actually done 60 times in 60 seconds. So that's no latency, because everything's getting completed. Or if it gets done 5 or 6 times in 1 second, or not necessarily a second, but in a frame between, it's like, I think it's 60 frames a second. So in between those frames, if all the scripts get done, and like they get done multiple times, you have enough, you're not CPU bound, or you have enough time to get them done. Otherwise, you have latency. And that would be interesting to see if SS2 is running, because like I say, it's just a little ring. You put it on and it just starts dumping a message. You don't want to leave it on all the time, because some people have noted problems with it if you leave it on all the time. And then you can just take it off, so you can see if SS2, if it see what your latency figure is. And it's kind of like a metric. It's not necessarily like an absolute, because I've noticed I noticed he would be like, yeah, my numbers are actually accurate, but I've noticed sometimes that they match up with what AMD or NVIDIA might use as a frame counter, FPS counter. And I've noticed it was off in some occasions. So, excuse, my stomach is getting ready to growl here again. But it's nothing. It's. I usually don't eat right off the bat. I usually have like some coffee, and then I'll run upstairs in about an hour or so, and then my work. This is my work area here, and I'll fix me something. Okay, so that's that. I'm gonna cut this one short, or I'm gonna cut this off so that it doesn't go on up for a super long time, and then we'll take a look at your load order, and I'll do the same thing with that, and then yeah, I'd love to work together on an SS2 thing, because that's kind of like what I did here. But let me explain that in the next video, or another video coming up here. And that way this won't be too long, and it won't be like a massive upload. It takes YouTube forever to do like 4K processing, because this is it's like I think this is like 5120. I forget what the resolution is. Let's see. There's got to be like a resolution here somewhere, somehow. Let's see. Yeah, I don't really see it. I'll probably have to look it up. Let me do resolution here. Alright, let's see. Alright, so I think it's like 5. Yeah, see, it's 5120 by 1440. So it's kind of a 32 by 9, and it takes them a long time to process that, even when there's not a lot of movement. And the compression really kind of messes up the images. But all right, so let me go ahead and close this one out, and I will we'll take a look at your load order next, and then we'll kind of sit down or I can maybe toss at you some of my ideas that I'm thinking about, like a base game, and then things that can be added to it, and stuff like that. Okay, so I'm going to end this real quick, and I'll be right back to get another one.